Hello again! I'm back, and as promised to the amazing Enigma, finally covering CRWBY's use of the Ozluminati's inspiration sources and why I think it's so clever. As always, thanks to my wonderful patrons for making this possible, links below. Okay, so quick clarification, Ozluminati is a popular fandom term for the secret conspiracy Ozpin was running behind the scenes until V3-6, depending on how you count it. Its active membership was made up of personally appointed headmasters, teachers, and agents chosen by Ozpin with the expectation they'd be loyal and follow his lead. Yeah, that didn't work out so hot. The core membership group is also especially unique because they share a singular story that their respective characters are based on, or more, a world. Oz, as in the magical land of Oz from Alice in Wonderland, and its surprisingly robust and expansive world building. Ozpin is the wizard, Glinda is the good witch, Ironwood the Tin Man, Crow the Scarecrow, Leo is the cowardly lion, plus Ozpin's initial persona, Ozma, fits with Princess Ozma, though one could argue that it is also thematically speaking Oscar. But what is it about the connections to these inspiration sources that is so clever in my eyes? Because it would be easy to say something like, oh, they're the failed analogues with their inspiration sources, but that's not quite right. That's too easy. See, in the source material, they seek out the wizard to gain what they believe they are lacking. In contrast, Ozpin here is the one to have sought them out, appointing people to positions aiding in their careers to create his lieutenants. And by aiding in their rises and in appointing them as he needed, Ozpin inadvertently stunted their growth as characters. This is because he basically gave them the equivalent of the wizard's placebo gifts without them ever developing the experience and core traits needed to stand without them. That is to say, when Dorothy's companions reached the wizard by choice, they had already developed the skills they needed to become who they wanted to be, who the story needed them to be. In contrast, by Ozpin having sought them out and bolstered them through their careers, he inadvertently cut off their journeys by jumping them to the end before they were ready. Examples. Glinda is interesting because her narrative role is almost the polar opposite of her book counterparts. In the books, yes, Glinda wants to restore the princess to her throne and see her unify Oz, but she is also an independent power broker in her own right. She is someone who Ozma turns to for advice and guidance. In contrast, RWBY's Glinda is an incredibly passive character who mostly does all the day work of managing Beacon and is doggedly loyal to Ozpin. She has no concept of her own worth against her monarchs. Lionheart was alleged to be a courageous man at one point, though we've no means of confirming that, and thus he may have simply looked the part, like the lion could look ferocious in spite of his cowardness. Leo was then appointed to head an academy of warriors as a faunus in a highly bigoted country with the hopes that he could fix it, despite having no aid or support. Leo was chosen for this position because Ozpin thought that Leo was who he needed, not because he'd earned it. Crow is an interesting play on the character because he knows he's smart, but he essentially let Ozpin do all his thinking for him anyway. Whereas Raven questioned everything and found out the truth, Crow was content to follow Ozpin until others forced him to see reality. In essence, up until the reveal, Crow tied everything to his Oz-gifted placebo, i.e. his duties as Ozpin's spy. Losing that placebo nearly destroyed him, just as relying on the wizard's placebo gift would have destroyed Scarecrow if he'd not already grown beyond the need of it. One of the key differences between Crow and the other examples on this list is he had a support network like his source character did to help him begin overcoming his loss. As for Ironwood and the Tin Woodsman, well, fun fact, but the Tin Man actually became a leader in its own right of the Winkies apparently, much like one could say Ironwood was the leader of Atlas, in fact, if not in name. Now, we don't know a ton about how Ironwood got to his position, though given Ozpin's penchant for influencing things, he may well have played a role, thus cutting off Ironwood's journey to earn his position. But even more damning is how Atlas's culture encouraged the suppression of emotions, which I would note does not equal logic or a lack of emotion, and Ironwood took that and ran with it, seeking to become less emotional, less of a person. Ozpin's favour, his placebo gifts, ultimately stunted the people he gave it to, and if RWBY had stayed at Beacon, they likely never would have grown and overcome as much as they already have. Ultimately, the Oz allegories are what happens if the party had gotten the false gifts of Oz without significant personal growth, without having journeyed and earned them. This contrasts them deeply to Team RWBY and Co., whose journey is deeply reflective of Dorothy's and company's, helping them understand their own inner strength and overcome their flaws. Anyway, I just think that's a really clever way to use analogous characters. If you would like to help support my work, please check out my Patreon or my Ko-fi where you can commission 3D art. Thanks for tuning in.